100 Apache warriors don't just show up at your ranch by accident. They come for blood, for justice, or for war. And Samuel Mackenzie was about to find out which one it was. But let's go back to where it all started, 24 hours earlier. The Arizona sun was beating down mercilessly on Sam's cattle ranch, somewhere between Tombstone and the middle of nowhere, when he first spotted the small figure stumbling toward his water hole. At 42, Sam had seen plenty of trouble in his 15 years working this God-forsaken piece of desert. But something about this particular afternoon felt different, wrong even. He was mending a broken fence post near his main water source when movement caught his eye. A child, couldn't be more than 10 or 11, was walking in unsteady zigzags toward the wooden trough where his cattle drank. The kid's clothes were torn, traditional Apache clothing that had seen much better days. And even from a distance, Sam could see the way hunger and thirst made each step a struggle. Most ranchers in these parts would have reached for their rifle first and asked questions later. The relationship between settlers and the local Apache tribes had been tense for years, with raids and counter-raids keeping everyone on edge. Blood had been spilled on both sides, and trust was as scarce as water in August. But Sam had always been different, maybe too different for his own good. He set down his tools and walked slowly toward the child, hands visible and movements careful. As he got closer, he could see it was a young boy, his dark eyes too large for his thin face, lips cracked and bleeding from no water. The kid tried to speak, his lips moving soundlessly at first, then managing a single word in broken English. Water. His small hands gestured weakly toward his mouth, then toward the trough, a language of need that went beyond any cultural barriers or old hatreds. Sam thought about his neighbors, about what they'd say if they saw him helping an Apache child. He thought about the warnings he'd heard in town about recent tensions with the tribes. He thought about the smart thing to do, the safe thing to do. Then he looked into those desperate eyes again and made the decision that would change everything. Without a word, Sam knelt beside the child and pressed a wooden cup to his lips, watching him drink like a man saved from drowning. The boy drank 3 full cups before his trembling hands could finally hold the rim steady. Sam watched every gulp, his mind racing with what he'd just done. In this territory, showing mercy to an Apache was like signing your own death warrant. But as color slowly returned to the boy's face, Sam noticed something that made his blood run cold. The child wasn't just dried out and starving. He was wounded. A bullet graze along his shoulder, fresh and still bleeding. Someone had shot at this kid, and judging by the powder burns around the edges, they'd done it at close range. Recent close range. Sam helped the boy into his modest cabin and sat him down gently in his only good chair. He moved quickly to prepare food, some leftover beans and hardtack from his own meager supplies, and water, plenty of water. The smell of the food seemed to revive the child slightly, and for the first time Sam saw something that might have been hope flicker in those dark eyes. As Sam ladled the beans into a bowl, he caught sight of something that made his hands freeze. Around the boy's neck, partially hidden by his torn shirt, was a distinctive necklace, intricate beadwork and patterns that Sam had seen before. His neighbor, old Pete Garrison, had described those exact patterns to him just last month. They were the ceremonial beads worn by the family of Chief Shush Bidzii, the most feared Apache war leader in all of Arizona territory. Sam's hand stopped halfway to handing over the bowl. If this boy was who he thought he wasn't just helping a hungry child. He was harboring the son of the man who could bring 100 warriors down on his head without breaking a sweat. But it was too late to change course now. The boy was already reaching for the food with shaking hands, and Sam couldn't bring himself to turn away a starving child. He handed over the bowl and watched as the child ate with the desperate hunger of someone who hadn't seen food in days. Every bite seemed to bring a little more life back to those young features. What Sam didn't know was that 20 miles away, an Apache search party had just found the boy's trail leading directly to his ranch, and Chief Shush Bidzii himself was riding at the head of that party, his face a mask of fury and grief that promised nothing but trouble for whoever had taken his son. The boy fell asleep in Sam's chair within an hour, exhaustion finally taking over his small body. Sam covered him with his only spare blanket and tried to convince himself he'd done the right thing. But as evening approached, that conviction started to crumble like old adobe in a rainstorm. The sound of hoofbeats on the dirt road made his stomach drop. Sam peered through his window and saw his neighbor, Jeremiah Walsh, riding hard toward his cabin with two other men Sam recognized from town, Deputy Sheriff Bill Crawford and the local doctor, Marcus Stone. Sam stepped outside before they could dismount, hoping to keep their voices down and avoid waking the boy. But Jeremiah was already shouting before his horse came to a full stop. "Sam, you damned fool! What in the hell are you thinking?" Jeremiah's weathered face was red with anger and something that looked like genuine fear. "Crawford here says he saw smoke signals coming from the hills this afternoon. The Apache are looking for something, or someone." Deputy Crawford nodded grimly, his hand resting on his pistol grip. "Word came from Fort Apache an hour ago. Chief Shush Bidzii's son went missing 2 days ago during a hunting party. Boy wandered off and got separated in a dust storm." He paused, studying Sam's face carefully. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about a missing Apache boy, would you, Sam?" Sam felt his throat go dry as desert sand. The smart thing would be to lie, to send them away and figure this out on his own. But these men had been his neighbors for years. Despite their flaws, they were here out of genuine concern for his safety. "He's inside," Sam said quietly, "half-starved and shot up. I couldn't just leave a child to die." The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Stone was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "Son, do you have any idea what you've done?" "I helped a hungry child." But even as he said it, he could hear how naive it sounded. Jeremiah started pacing back and forth, running his hands through his gray hair. "They're going to think you took him. Hell, they probably already think that. Shush Bidzii's been known to burn entire settlements to ash for less than this." Deputy Crawford was already backing toward his horse. "I have to report this, Sam. It's my duty. But I'll give you a head start. Get the boy back to his people before they find you here." "In the dark?" Sam asked. "He can barely walk. And how am I supposed to approach an Apache camp without getting shot full of arrows?" "That's your problem now," Crawford said, mounting his horse. "I'm riding back to town to warn everyone else. If Shush Bidzii decides to make an example of you, he might not stop at just your ranch." As the three men rode away in a cloud of dust, Sam stood alone in the growing darkness, listening to the boy's quiet breathing from inside the cabin. He thought about saddling up his horse and trying to find the Apache camp, but he knew it was suicide. He thought about loading the child into his wagon and trying to reach the nearest fort, but that would only make things worse. The truth was, there was no good way out of this. Every option led to the same place, a confrontation with one of the most feared war chiefs in Arizona territory. As if summoned by his thoughts, a new sound drifted across the plains. The distant rhythm of war drums, growing closer with each passing minute. Sam's blood turned to ice. They weren't waiting for morning. The Apache were coming tonight. Sam rushed back into the cabin, his mind racing. The war drums were getting louder, and he could now make out individual beats in the rhythm. Slow, methodical, and absolutely terrifying. It wasn't the chaotic noise of a raiding party. This was something far more organized and infinitely more dangerous. The boy stirred in the chair, awakened by the sound of the drums. His eyes opened wide, and for the first time since Sam had found him, he saw recognition cross the child's face. The boy understood what those drums meant better than Sam ever could. The child spoke rapidly in Apache, pointing toward the door and then at himself. Even without understanding the words, he could see the panic in his movements. The boy was trying to tell him something important, but the language barrier made communication nearly impossible. Sam knelt down beside the chair, speaking as calmly as he could manage. "I know you can't understand me, little one, but I'm trying to help you. Those drums, that's your people coming for you, isn't it?" The boy nodded vigorously, then grabbed Sam's shirt and pulled him toward the window. He held up both hands, opening and closing his fingers repeatedly. Sam counted along with the child's movements. 10, 20, 30. The boy kept going until he'd counted to what looked like 100. Sam's legs went weak. 100 warriors. He'd been hoping for maybe a dozen angry braves that he could somehow reason with. But 100? That was enough to level every ranch for 50 miles around. The drums stopped suddenly, and the silence that followed was somehow worse than the noise had been. Sam moved to the window and peered out into the darkness. At first, he saw nothing. Then, like ghosts coming to life from the night itself, he began to make out shapes moving across his property. They came in perfect formation, warriors on horseback, spread out in a wide half-circle that was slowly tightening around his cabin. Even in the moonlight, Sam could see the war paint on their faces, the feathers in their hair, the weapons in their hands. These weren't men who had come to negotiate. The boy tugged on Sam's sleeve, gesturing toward himself and then toward the door. He wanted to go to them, but Sam couldn't tell if that would help or make everything worse. What if they thought he'd hurt the child? What if they didn't believe the boy had come to him willingly? A single voice called out from the darkness, speaking in English with a heavy accent but perfect clarity. "White man, we know you have taken something that belongs to us. Send out the boy, and perhaps you will live to see morning." Sam's mouth went dry. The voice carried absolute authority. This had to be Chief Shush Bidzii himself. Sam had heard stories about the man, how he'd united several Apache bands under his leadership, how he'd never lost a battle against the cavalry. And now Sam was about to face him across a conversation that could end with everyone dead. Sam stepped toward the door, but the boy grabbed his arm with surprising strength for someone so small. The child shook his head frantically and pointed to himself, then made a cutting gesture across his throat. He was trying to warn Sam about something. But what? Then it hit Sam like lightning. The boy wasn't just Chief Shush Bidzii's son. In Apache culture, if anything had happened to him while in Sam's care, even if it wasn't Sam's fault, Shush Bidzii would have no choice but to make an example that other settlers would never forget. Sam made the hardest decision of his life. He opened the cabin door and stepped outside with his hands raised high, the boy following close behind him. The sight that greeted him was something straight out of his worst nightmares. 100 Apache warriors sat motionless on their horses, forming a perfect circle around his property. War paint gleamed in the moonlight, and every weapon was pointed directly at him. At the front of the formation sat a man who could only be Chief Shush Bidzii, massive, imposing, with silver streaking through his long black hair and eyes that seemed to burn with barely contained fury. The boy ran toward his father, calling out in Apache. But instead of the joyful reunion Sam expected, Shush Bidzii's expression grew even darker. The chief dismounted and knelt beside his son, examining him carefully while the child spoke rapidly, gesturing back toward Sam and the cabin. Sam couldn't understand the words, but he could read the chief's body language. Every muscle in Shush Bidzii's frame was coiled like a spring ready to explode into violence. Whatever the boy was telling him, it wasn't making things better. Finally, Shush Bidzii stood up and walked toward Sam with slow, deliberate steps. The other warriors remained mounted, but shifted their weapons, the subtle movement creating a sound like rattlesnakes preparing to strike. "My son tells me you fed him. He tells me you gave him shelter." He stopped just outside arm's reach, close enough that Sam could see the intricate scars on the chief's chest, marks of countless battles won and enemies defeated. "Yes," Sam replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "I couldn't let a child die." Shush Bidzii studied him for a long moment. "He also tells me something else. He tells me that white soldiers shot him, that they killed his mother and little sister at a peace meeting 3 days ago, that he is the only witness to their murder." Sam felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "White soldiers killed your family?" "Bluecoats came under a flag of truce. They said they wanted to discuss expanding the reservation boundaries. My wife brought our daughter to show good faith. The soldiers opened fire without warning, claiming we had attacked first." The boy tugged something urgently to his father in Apache. Shush Bidzii's face darkened further. "My son says the soldiers are coming here. They tracked him just as we did. They want to silence the only witness to their crime." And as if summoned by those words, a new sound reached them, the thunder of hoofbeats approaching fast. Over the ridge came a column of cavalry soldiers, perhaps 40 strong, riding hard toward the ranch with their weapons drawn. At their head rode a man Sam recognized, Major Daniel Harrison from Fort Apache, a career soldier with a reputation for ruthless efficiency when it came to Indian problems. Harrison was the kind of officer who believed the only good Apache was a dead Apache. The soldiers formed a battle line facing the Apache warriors, creating a deadly standoff with Sam's ranch caught in the middle. Major Harrison spurred his horse forward, his eyes fixed on the boy. "Chief Shush Bidzii, I'm here for the boy. He's wanted for the murder of civilians at the peace meeting. Hand him over, and we'll consider this matter closed." Chief Shush Bidzii's face went rigid with controlled rage. "You dare accuse my son of the murders you committed? The boy opened fire first, killed 2 innocent women before we could stop him. He's a dangerous savage who needs to face military justice." That's when the boy did something that surprised everyone. He stepped forward and spoke in clear, careful English, the first time Sam had heard him speak the white man's language. "I saw everything," the child said, his young voice carrying across the tense silence. "I hid in the rocks when the shooting started. The soldiers shot first. They killed my mother while she was holding a white flag. They killed my little sister while she was trying to run away." Major Harrison's mask of military authority slipped for just a moment, revealing the desperation underneath. "The testimony of a savage child means nothing in a court of law." "But it means everything to us," Shush Bidzii replied. He gestured to his warriors, and I heard the whisper of 100 arrows being nocked simultaneously. Sam found himself doing something he never thought he'd do, stepping between 2 armies ready to tear each other apart. "Wait!" he called out, his voice cracking with strain. "There has to be another way." Both Shush Bidzii and Major Harrison looked at him as if he'd lost his mind. Here was a simple rancher trying to prevent a war between the U.S. Army and one of the most feared Apache war chiefs in the territory. "Major," Sam said, his voice growing stronger, "if you're so sure about what happened, why not let the boy tell his story to the territorial governor? Let the law decide what's true." "The boy is a hostile," Harrison snapped. "He'll be dealt with under military law." "No," Sam said, and the words seemed to surprise him as much as everyone else. "I won't let you murder a child to cover up your crimes." Shush Bidzii looked at Sam with something that might have been respect. "You would stand against your own people for my son?" Sam thought about his comfortable life, his peaceful ranch, the safety of staying neutral. Then he looked at the boy, scared but brave, standing up to the men who had murdered his family. "He's just a child telling the truth. That's not Apache or white. That's just right and wrong." Major Harrison's patience snapped. He drew his pistol and pointed it directly at the boy. "Enough of this. The savage dies here and now." Without thinking, Sam threw himself between the gun and the child. The pistol fired, and Sam felt the bullet tear through his shoulder, spinning him around, but he stayed on his feet, shielding the boy with his body. The sound of that gunshot was like a match thrown into gunpowder. 100 Apache warriors raised their weapons as one, their war cries splitting the night air. The cavalry soldiers brought their rifles to bear, fingers on triggers. But before the massacre could begin, the boy shouted something in Apache that cut through the chaos like a knife. His young voice carried such authority that even the warriors paused. Shush Bidzii translated, his voice thick with emotion. "My son says that enough innocent people have died. He says that if more blood is spilled tonight, the soldiers win even if they lose. He says his mother and sister would not want their deaths to start a war that kills more children." The standoff continued. 100 Apache arrows aimed at 40 cavalry rifles, with Sam bleeding between them, and a child's wisdom holding back a war. Major Harrison's face cycled through rage, desperation, and calculation. That's when salvation arrived in an unexpected form. Dr. Stone came riding over the ridge with a column of territorial marshals and what looked like half the population of Tombstone. Behind them rode a man in a black suit who could only be someone very important. "I am Territorial Governor Murphy," the man announced, his voice carrying legal authority that even Major Harrison couldn't ignore. "Major Harrison, you and your men will stand down immediately." Major Harrison's world collapsed in that moment. "Governor, this is a military matter. This is a territorial matter involving the murder of civilians under a flag of truce. Dr. Stone also brought me something very interesting." He held up a bundle of papers. "Telegrams from witnesses at Fort Apache who saw what really happened at that peace meeting." The boy walked slowly toward the governor, still staying close to Sam. "I can tell you everything that happened," he said in his careful English. "I remember every face, every shot fired." The governor nodded to his marshals, who moved to surround Major Harrison and his most loyal soldiers. "Major, you're under arrest for the murder of civilians and conspiracy to cover up war crimes." With the immediate threat removed, Shush Bidzii knelt and embraced his son for the first time since the nightmare began. The chief's weathered face showed emotions that Sam had never expected to see in a legendary war leader: relief, love, and something that looked like hope. Shush Bidzii approached Sam, who was still bleeding from his shoulder wound but refusing medical attention until he knew the boy was safe. "You took a bullet for my son," the chief said quietly. "Any father would have done the same," Sam replied. Shush Bidzii placed both hands on Sam's shoulders, a gesture of respect that made several of his own warriors gasp in surprise. "You are no longer just a white rancher to us. You are Wahoo, brother. You have a place among the Apache people for as long as you live." What followed was unlike anything Sam had ever witnessed. One by one, Apache warriors dismounted and approached him. Each touched his uninjured shoulder briefly, not a handshake in the white man's fashion, but something deeper, a recognition of courage that transcended skin color or culture. When the last warrior had paid his respects, Shush Bidzii presented Sam with a gift that took his breath away. A war lance decorated with eagle feathers and intricate beadwork, its shaft worn smooth by generations of hands. "This belonged to my grandfather and his grandfather before him. It has never been carried by anyone not born Apache, until today." As the crisis resolved and the various groups prepared to depart, the boy approached Sam one final time. "Thank you for the water," he said in English. "Thank you for the food. Thank you for standing between me and the gun." Sam knelt down to the boy's level, wincing slightly from his shoulder wound. "What's your name, son?" "In Apache, I am called Swift River, but my mother taught me an English name too. She called me Chayton." "Well, Chayton," Sam said, extending his hand, "if you ever need water again, you know where to find it." The boy shook his hand solemnly,
and surprised Sam by hugging him quickly before running back to his father. As dawn broke over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the Apache prepared to depart. Major Harrison and his conspirators were led away in chains, their crimes exposed by the courage of one child and the conscience of one rancher. Sam stood on his porch, his arm in a sling, watching as 100 Apache warriors rode away in perfect formation. But they left behind something precious, proof that in a world full of hatred and fear, simple human decency could still work miracles. 6 months later, Sam's ranch had become something unique in Arizona territory. Neutral ground where Apache and white settlers could meet safely. The boy, Chayton, visited regularly, serving as a translator and bridge between two worlds that had been at war for generations. Major Harrison was court-martialed and sentenced to life in prison for the murder of civilians. His conviction marked the first time in territorial history that a U.S. officer was held accountable for crimes against Apache people. And on a hill overlooking his ranch, Sam built a small memorial to Chayton's mother and sister, two innocent lives whose deaths had nearly started a war, but whose memory helped create peace instead. Because sometimes, in the brutal landscape of the Old West, the greatest battles weren't won with guns or violence, but with something far more powerful: the courage to see enemies as human beings, and the wisdom to choose compassion over fear.
From a simple act of giving water to a thirsty child to transforming an entire valley into a place of peace, what an incredible journey. If this story of courage, sacrifice, and unity touched your heart, subscribe to Tony Tells Tales for more powerful stories where one person's choice can change everything. This is what we do here at Tony Tells Tales. We bring you stories that remind you of the hero inside yourself. Tell us in the comments where you're from and what moment hit you hardest. Was it Sam's first act of kindness? The moment he took that bullet? Or seeing the peaceful community they built together? Remember, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes. Just like Sam discovered, you never know when your moment to make a difference will come. Until next time, this is Tony Tells Tales reminding you to keep choosing courage over fear and love over hate.